Meanwhile, this week, in a very public way, attempted once again to try and remove current presidents of Venezuela and have him replaced with a member of the opposition who has promised to be much more beholden to Washington. That seems to be the U.S. plan. Now, some would argue what the U.S. is doing is necessary because of the poor state of Venezuela's economy. But others say that the poor state of Venezuela's economy is being caused by U.S. economic pressure, including sanctions, which have cost the Venezuelan government billions of dollars. Look, either way, no matter how you look at this thing, it's been a tumultuous week in Venezuela. Here now, RT correspondent Michele Greenstein.
It began early Tuesday. It's barely sunrise when U.S.-backed opposition leader Juan Guaido stands in the heart of Venezuela's capital, calling for Venezuelans to take to the streets and declaring that a rebellion was at hand. He has himself photographed surrounded by men in military uniforms, saying that the military has crossed over to his side. Within hours, opposition protesters clashed with government forces loyal to the elected president, Nicolas Maduro. And back in the U.S., National Security Advisor John Bolton urged Venezuelan officials to join in switching their allegiance to Guaido. But at the end of the day, Maduro was still president, and if the U.S. wanted a coup, they weren't going to get it. And if that wasn't clear that night, it became very clear the next day when Maduro gave a speech in the presidential palace as hundreds of thousands took to the street to demonstrate their support. Meanwhile, Juan Guaido, seemingly at the urging of the White House, assured his supporters that this was the final phase of what he calls Operation Freedom, and that the definitive overthrow of Maduro was on its way. But back in the U.S., something else is going on. A group of U.S. activists calling themselves the Embassy Protection Collective has been living inside the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. They say to protect it from being taken from the Venezuelan government of Nicolas Maduro. In fact, last month, the State Department told Maduro's diplomats to get out of the Venezuelan embassy. But when that deadline expired last week on April 24th, something interesting happened. The activists didn't leave. They're worried about the precedent that Guaido obtaining this embassy might set. The Embassy Protection Collective also sees this attempt to give the embassy to Guaido as somewhat of a desperate Hail Mary by the U.S. government. But opposition protests showed up on Tuesday to tell them to get out. They came with signs declaring Maduro a usurper and sang songs praising Juan Guaido.
I will come back and I will stay here as much as I can because we want them out.
We believe Juan Guaido is our only chance for Venezuelans in Venezuela and in the world to restore democracy.
But the Embassy Protection Collective says it's not so simple. They think that Venezuela is already a democracy, and despite opposition claims that the Maduro government is starving people, they see the suffering in Venezuela as the result of U.S. imperialism. And as for the opposition protesters outside the embassy, the collective says that they're the minority.
The Chavista government of Hugo Chavez Frias and Nicolas Maduro has withstood more free and fair elections than any government on earth.
Pretty sure they're the minority if they already lost the election.
Then Wednesday, Guaido's supposed diplomats arrive at the embassy, welcomed by the opposition. But they find themselves drowned out by the Embassy Protection Collective and eventually leave. It seems this attempted coup of Venezuela has failed. The question is, will the United States accept that?
And Rick, the Trump administration obviously has been hoping that this week would have been a turning point in overthrowing the government of Maduro and ushering in that new era of privatization that comes with Mr. Juan Guaido. But that obviously did not happen. Maduro is still in power in Venezuela. As for here at the Venezuelan embassy, both sides are still standing off, as you can see and hear behind me. But as for now, the Maduro supporters are still in control of the building. And with that, Rick, I'll kick it back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Michele. I'm Rick Sanchez. You found us on YouTube, and that's awesome. But you know what? I'm also live every night at 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern on DirecTV and Dish and cable and satellite, the RT app, and Pluto TV. I'll see you there.